Hey YouTube, it's your girl Stacey Celeste, and I'm back with you guys with my February wrap-up video. As we all know, Black History Month was in February, and so I read four, maybe five books that are associated with Black History Month by African American authors. One book was by a Afro-Caribbean author, and then there was one book that was not by an African American author, but I read it at the beginning of the month, and that's what we're going to start off with. And y'all, it was good. So that book was none other than It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I listened to it on audiobook, so I'll go ahead and insert the picture of the book right here. So It Ends With Us is about a young lady named Lily. She got like a really weird name. It's like Lily Flower, I forget. But it's weird, really weird. I'll put it on the bottom. It's like super flowery. Super ironic, so funny. But anyways, the book starts off with Lily losing her father, and she's on top of this apartment balcony in Boston, and she's overlooking the city, and she's, obviously kind of existential. She lost her father. She doesn't know how to feel about it. Her father wasn't the best guy, far from the best guy, and so she's just kind of really existential on top of her roof. And she has this encounter with this doctor, and he is handsome, but he's very angry, and he's kicking stuff around, and he doesn't know she's up there. But then they catch eyes, and he finds out she's up there. Then they start talking and flirting, and they have a very organic conversation. Lily talks about how she has this corporate job, but she wants to open a flower shop, and he's talking about the irony, I know, but he's talking about, like, I don't even remember what he's talking about, but some ish from being a doctor. And yeah, they hit it off really well. Fast forward, they don't see each other. Lily actually opens her flower shop, and what do you know, she hires this guy's sister, so they encounter each other again, and boom, there's our love story. This is where I thought the book was going to go. I thought we were just going to learn about their lives. But Colleen Hoover had something else in mind, and she zoomed in and threw some curveballs that I personally was not expecting, because I was going into this book thinking that I was going to be reading a romance book, but it was more than that. It was so much more than that, because it turns out that the love interest has some issues, and it is domestic issues, and what we thought was going to be a fairy tale turns out to not be a fairy tale. And then there's another curveball, because one of the guys that Lily fell in love with, her first love from when she was younger, who happened to actually be a homeless boy, he comes back into her life in an interesting circumstance. So there's this kind of love triangle deal going on, but what adds a layer to it is the imperfectness of the people in the story and the experiences of the people in the story. So that kind of caught me off guard and was kind of a surprise. I loved how she did that, and because of that, I really, really, really enjoyed this book. This is a very, very, very popular story. A lot of people talk about it, and yeah, so it's a super duper popular story, but I definitely understand why. Based on the genre, and I feel like the intention of the writer and what she tried to do, I feel like she executed it very well. I thoroughly enjoyed the story, and I ended up giving this 5 stars on Goodreads. So, like, one of the things that I think I'm going to do a video about is like my star ratings, because by no means is this book a literary icon, but for me, what it was intended to do, it did it, and it executed, and I was thoroughly entertained. And so yeah, I gave her 5 stars. There are some of these books that we're going to talk about today that didn't get 5 stars from me, but are iconic books, and they doesn't take away the iconic nature of them. It just is, it's a mixture of, like, I feel like they're very well executed, but it's a mixture of how I felt reading the book, and sometimes it's just the uncomfortability of the book, but also maybe how I was able to track through the book. I might have got lost in certain instances. And so I want to kind of give you guys like a preface there, that by no means do I think this book, just because I gave it 5 stars, is better than some of the other books on this list that are iconic. But I just felt like, I picked all the way up. I was able to pick up what the author was putting down all the way. And for me, some of these other books are a little bit, there's aspects of them that maybe a little bit over my head, and I wasn't able to pick it up all the way in the same way that I was able to pick this book up. So it's no slight. So I want to preface that piece, okay? So with that being said, the next book that I read was a very, very short story. I read it on Kindle. It's free on Kindle, and it's by N.K. Jemisin. I'll put it up here. It is Emergency Skin, and I think it's like 30 pages. But, so it's not even really a whole book, but I thoroughly enjoyed this story. I feel like it could have been even longer. I don't really want to give it away. Like, I don't want to talk too much about it, because it is such a short story that it's kind of hard to give a synopsis, so without giving the whole story away. So all I'll say is that it's in a dystopian world, and there's people from outer land that come back to America, and the conversations, the dialogue, the creativity that she used to kind of, to me, and capture a more societal issue, or a more contemporary issues that we are dealing with now. Thought it was super unique, super dope, and yeah, easy 5 stars. Thoroughly enjoyed the read. I wish it could have been longer, but I think that it did a good job, and it was well executed as that 30-page short story. That, I thought it was 5 stars, great read, and yeah, let's move on. Yeah, so these are the books that I actually read for Black History Month. We'll go through these in the order that I finished them. The first book that I accomplished was none other than A Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honorée Fanonne Jeffers. This book was fantastic. It's so loaded. There's certain stories in the book, or certain storylines in the book, that I was mediocre. Like, there probably would have been 3 or 4 star storylines for me, but the storyline with any storyline with Ailey in it, who I would say is probably the main character in the story, even though there are a lot of characters in this story. I loved every storyline with her in it. I loved her. I loved her personality. She just resonated with me so profoundly as a character, and I think she drove the novel to 5 stars for me. What I love about this book is that it intertwines history with narrative so well. There is a split timeline where you kind of go back in history, and you see the lineage of Ailey and her family. You can kind of see where it came from, and you kind of go back and forth to, I would say, not present time, but present time in terms of, like, I think it was in the 90s, early 2000s, that a lot of the oldest, or the newest portion of the book was like early 2000s, 90s, and the oldest was back in the times of slavery, so in like the 19th century, 1800s, that time period. And I just think she just did a great job of like intertwining these historical facts, like the Indian Removal Act, the friction, or the differences in opinion, or philosophical differences of W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, that's expressed through here. There's The Color Purple is a book that is mentioned in this book. There's so many like historical gems that are scattered throughout, and the narrative itself is fiction, but it just carries a lot of this weight, and I really think it does an excellent job of showing us how interconnected we are as Americans, whether it be Native Americans, whether it be African Americans or white people, how our histories are so interconnected, and how, for me, I'm an African American person. I don't know, I didn't take a DNA test, so I don't know my history. I know that nobody that I know in my family is white, but there's probably a large chance that there is white in me, or even Native American in me, even though the people that I grew up with and that I, know in my family are considered African American. So I think it resonates very well for me as somebody that doesn't necessarily know their history, back to slavery time, but also just as an American. So I think this is a very profound piece of American literature. I think that it's something that should be read in the classroom and discussed in the classroom. What I loved the most, other than Ailey, is how it explores this topic of intersectionality. If you read the back of the book, like in the author's note, it's not the author, archival coda, it's called, Honoree, like she explicitly states, like this is a work of, this is a feminist work. And what I loved about it is that one of the things that I have been, intrigued with, because it's been coming and hit me in the face left and right, whether it be at work or, socially, or in the reading that I've been doing, is this concept of intersectionality, especially for me being on the intersection of race and gender, and how there's aspects and components of white supremacy that you feel in being in feminist spaces, but then there's this component of patriarchy that you feel when you are in black spaces. So you can never really escape or truly feel free on these intersections, because where you place your identity is still, there's no power, like in the structure of society, you don't benefit from any of these power structures. And I think what goes further is that when you read this, you'll see nobody really benefits from these power structures. They all are like oppressive within themselves, not just the people that are explicitly oppressed. There's still this implicit oppression that you have when you are identifying or acting within these power structures. So that is a whole nother story. There's so many books about it. There's one book that I had picked up, that I had read last year, that kind of resonated with me as I read this book and as I started exploring this month this concept of intersectionality, and that is Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. There's a lot of different passages that I highlighted that spoke to a lot of these things that kind of came up in this book. And so I haven't posted on Instagram a review of this book yet, because I think that there's more that I want to do with it, because there's so much here, but we'll see. Stay tuned. This was obviously 5 stars for me. It took up the bulk of my reading this month, obviously, because it's like 800 pages, but toward the end of the month, I was able to complete 3 smaller books. And so let's just go right into those right now. All right, so the first of the smaller books that I was able to complete was The Dew Breaker by Edwidge Danticat. And Edwidge Danticat is I think she's known for her short stories. And that's one of the things that, you saw, if you saw my reading diaries, this was the first reading diary that I actually did. So I won't spend a whole lot of time with this one, or the next one, because they both have reading diaries. But this is, when I started reading this book, I was reading it as a story, but I think for me, it resonated better as I started to read each chapter or each section of the book as a short story. And then just, at the end, kind of seeing how they connected with each other to tell the story of the Dew Breaker, who is a torturer from Haiti who made his way up to New York for like, and found some level of redemption of, like, getting back to a normal life in New York. However, the life was never very normal, and it goes into the stories of the people, not only himself, but the people who his actions affected. And I thought it was a beautiful story. I wasn't super duper entertained. I think I gave this 3.5 to 4 stars. It was solid. It was good. It got me very interested in Haitian history and Haitian American history. So I definitely will read more stories by Edwidge Danticat. And I definitely think it's a good story to read. It's very short. It goes really fast. I read this hybrid, so I had an audiobook as well. Unless you So I have a tough time with accents sometimes. So the audiobook was like accented. So I had a better time just actually reading the book than listening to the audiobook, or doing them both at the same time was working. But I couldn't just listen to the audiobook. So there's that. But the Dew Breaker, if you want to learn more about my thoughts on the Dew Breaker, go ahead and check out the Dew Breaker reading diary that is up on my channel right now. All right, so this next book, like I said, was also a reading diary, and that is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Again, if you want to listen to my thoughts, my thorough thoughts on this book, check out the reading diary for The Bluest Eye, which is also up on my channel. Obviously, this is a classic book. I read this as a part of the read along sponsored by the Literary Partners, and it was an experience because there were a lot of authors that were reading, like famous Black women authors that were reading in the read along. I love this book. I love the experience of reading this with the read along. However, I think because there were different authors reading, my experience was a little bit disjointed. I was able to pull everything back together, but I think that, you know, the experience of the book, the experience of reading the book was fun and exciting, but some of the storyline I got confused. Not confused, but like just it was disjointed and I had to kind of put it together. So this was my second time going through this. It definitely resonated with me 10 times more reading it the second time through. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars just because I couldn't pick up everything that Toni was putting down. But it's Toni Morrison. It's Toni Morrison. So, I mean, the writing is lyrical. The writing is beautiful. The way that she's able to make, like I say, to me, I love when authors are able to make emotions and feelings that are intangible tangible through their writing. I absolutely love that. It's so beautiful of a book, super short, super easy to get through, but I thought it's just done very well executed. However, I had to drop it to the 4 just because of me kind of getting a little lost. And I think a big part of that, like I said, was it being the read along. While it was a great experience, sometimes it wasn't as cohesive as I would have liked to truly experience the book in the way that I think that Toni Morrison wanted us to experience it. But nonetheless, Toni Morrison is a great. This is why I had to give that preface earlier about my ratings. Toni Morrison is a great. This is a book that everybody should read, that should be in the classroom. Shame on you if you don't teach this book in college. I mean, in high school. Shame on you, because I didn't get this book in high school. But shame on you if this book is not a part of your literature program for your high school students. Shame on you if you are a psychology student and don't read something like this, or The Bluest Eye, or any of other Toni Morrison's work, because it gets into the psychology of racism in a way that only a Black woman author can do. So Toni Morrison, queen. Loved this rendition of the book, and yeah, if you want to know more, check out that reading diary. Last but not least, for the month of February, I read the Langston Hughes's The Weary Blues. This is a collection of poetry by none other than Langston Hughes, and there were so many gems in this particular book. I posted on my Instagram to my Black History Month wrap up, and part of that post was the last poem in this book. So check out my Instagram for that poem. I will read another poem in here. This is Lament for Dark Peoples. I was a red man one time, but the white man came. I was a black man too, but the white men came. They drove me out of the forest. They took me away from the jungles. I lost my trees. I lost my silver moons. Now they've caged me in the circus of civilization. Now I herd with the many, caged in the circus of civilization. Like, these were the type of poems that were in there. I thought this was a beautiful collection. This was my first time reading Langston Hughes. So it was definitely a beautiful thing to end off my Black History Month with. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's pretty easily a 4.5 to 5 stars for poetry. I'm not that seasoned in reading poetry, so this is maybe my 3rd or 4th poetry book that I've read. So definitely want to get into more poetry. I think that, like, if you want to talk about lyricism and words, that is poetry. Poetry to me is like, is rap. It's the same deal. And there's also an article that I read about that I might do something with, stay tuned. Anyways, yeah, this was, I gave 5 stars, and that is my February reading wrap up. I had an extraordinary reading month for February. If everything else was like chaotic, because the last couple months this month will be a little chaotic for me as well, just with work and stuff. February reading was just exceptional. So it gave me that solace in reading that I needed. So there's that. These are the hardback books that I read. And yeah, until next time, peace out. You guys have a beautiful day. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more. Bye, y'all.